What's up, guys? It is John from Side Hustle Experiment. In today's video, I have an awesome interview. I interviewed Dillon Carter from GoAura. He is the co-founder. It is the repricer that I use. Awesome guy. We're going to talk all about repricing, but we start talking about business, mindset, peak performance. He goes over the different kind of leverages in business. He doesn't think like an Amazon seller. He thinks like a business person. How you could implement these systems into your business to free up your time, when you should hire a VA, when you shouldn't. And we do get into repricing. Probably the first half is about mindset and how you should really be thinking about your Amazon business to really take it to the next level, which is probably the most important part of this interview. But then part two of the interview, it's not broken up, it's just kind of a flowed conversation. We talk about how to set up a repricer, how you should think about it, when you should liquidate inventory, the type of repricing you should set up, all that good stuff. If you want a free trial of Aura, click the link below. I use it, highly recommend it, and enjoy the video, guys. What's up, Dylan?
How's it going?
Good, it's going great. So, can you give us a quick overview, kind of how you got started in Amazon, what you're up to now, and kind of how you got where you are?
Yeah, the quintessential seller's journey, I guess you could say, right? So,
Yeah.
found out about selling on Amazon via a podcast. I believe it was Pat Flynn's Smart Passive Income podcast with the Selling Family, right? I think they're still around.
It's amazing
I,
how many people start with that.
I
Like, it's
know.
so old, and like, I still hear it, like,
Yeah,
still to
it's
this
insane.
day.
Yeah, so found out about that, right? Listened to that. At the time, I was a personal trainer full time, and I really wanted something that could scale more, right? So like when you're trading your time for money, it's kind of hard to scale, right? You can either work more hours or you can increase your rates. With the personal training stuff, it was very relationship based, right? So I felt kind of odd increasing my rates for people that I've been helping and built a relationship with. Either way, though, so I started to test the waters, right? I would spend the weekends doing retail arbitrage because that was like what the Selling Family recommended as a model. So that was my entry point, right? I would just go to Targets, Walmart's, scan a bunch of stuff, ship it in. Basically, like that first milestone as a seller is just proving that it's real, right? You get that first sale and you're like, okay, the money got
You
deposited
probably like
in my
lost
account.
money on it, but you're like, this is awesome.
Yeah, but the fact that like you went full circle, right? Like the fact that you did that and close the loop is like super important, major milestone. And then you start to say, okay, well, okay, like what if I turn this into a business now? Like now I get to make that decision. So at the time, that wasn't really the case for me. I was way too busy training, ended up leaving that gym. The GM and I just didn't see eye to eye on something. It was kind of a, last minute thing. And I kind of had my first fork in the road, which was my client saying, we'll go wherever you want, wherever you're going, we'll follow you. So I had a clientele base. I could have done at-home training. I could have bought a gym that was small that didn't do a whole lot of personal training and built it out, go to a different gym, whatever. But again, for me, it always came down to scale and leverage, right? Like that's something that I've been really tripling down on, especially this past year, just like understanding and utilizing leverage. And there's like 8 different types. We can geek out if you want. But
Yeah,
the
definitely.
point there is I decided to let that go, triple down and spend as much time as I could sourcing. And so I was spending 8 to 10 hours a day sourcing retail arbitrage. And at the time I decided to go back to school too. It was part-time at this point, but eventually again, got to a point where I'm like, I can't spend this much time sourcing, right? Like, again, it's my time. Like, yeah, I'm making sales when I'm quote unquote sleeping, but if I'm not sourcing, it's not getting done. And I really didn't want to build out like a team of sourcers. Like that's just not something I cared to do. So now you get into the world of, okay, online arbitrage, right? I experimented with that. I was horrible at it, if we're being frank, and decided, okay, well, I'm either going to go private label or wholesale, right? That's like that next big kind of fork in the road for a lot of sellers, right? What's that next layer? For me, I needed cash flow. I needed to pay the bills. So private label didn't make sense for me because, you're having to invest a lot, wait 12 months, pull back, ideally exit at some point, which is cool. That's a long-term play. So I went the wholesale route. So I essentially told myself I was not allowed to source inventory unless it was wholesale, which is difficult, right? But sometimes you need to create friction to make progress, right? So I intentionally created that friction.
That's exactly what I did. I was selling
Awesome.
books, bulk books, and then I was like, I started going to OA, and I'm like, I'll just order some more books. I
Yeah.
sold all the equipment, and then that was it. Like,
Now you don't have a choice. Exactly. Yeah.
uh,
So did that. It took me, 4 months really to figure it out. And once I did, I was like, oh, okay, I've been viewing it wrong. And a lot of people do. Like, there's a big perspective shift that I think needs to happen for people that are going into wholesale. But once that clicked for me, it started to take off, was able to pay my bills, had a business, and then decided to go to school full time. So I'm full time finance major running this business, decided to also get a part-time job at a startup locally because I was like, scale, right? I'm always thinking, what's the scalable thing? I like learning, right? It wasn't a whole lot of hours. It was good. So basically was doing that. Then came my next big life fork in the road. I started reaching out to every wholesale seller that was bigger than me on Instagram at the time and just DMing them, right? Like, hey, I'll pay you for your time. I just need to understand, like, how do I scale from 6 to 7 figures? And only one person responded and said, hey, don't worry about the money. Like, let's just geek out. We jumped on Skype back then. And that happened to be my now co-founder, James, who's actually back here. So, we started to chat once a week, essentially just holding each other accountable, sharing insights, helping essentially each other. And it eventually came out like, hey, James is a computer science major in college right now. He's an engineer. Like, he can build software. He had started working on what is now VinDriveCRM.com. So it was interesting how we had independently built our own systems using things like Google Sheets, Excel, Trello. And he's like, I kind of just wrote an application to do that. So we ended up teaming up on that. And that was what VinDrive, the company, is now, right? So we did that. And then again, I got to a point where I just had so much on my plate. I had to cut something. And I remember sitting down and saying, what gets cut? At the time, the startup role, I left that. They were downsizing. So I was like, cool, learned a lot of what not to do. That's for sure. So got my lessons, moved on, got paid to get those lessons. And yeah, then got to a point where, again, I still had too much. And I'm the person that, like, I understand law of entropy. I understand that if you're not going to be hyper-focused on something, if you're going to be super distracted, you're really not going to make any progress, right? These are the people that are like, you got to build 7 sources of income. I was like, okay, you get there. You don't start with that, right? You start with one, hyper-focus, scale it, go to a second one, scale it, hyper-focus, right? So I ultimately decided in the early days of InDrive to shut down the Amazon business, which was like super difficult. Yeah, super difficult. I remember talking to friends that were like, you're an idiot. And, maybe at the time for me, I was willing to make that bet, right? Because I saw the opportunities. I also knew what I wanted to build as like a founder, as an entrepreneur. I knew the world I wanted to create. And while being a seller is super awesome, and I miss a lot of aspects of it, I just short-term opportunity that were like all the stars aligned for James and I to be able to do something incredible. And so that's what I did. So I let all my inventory slide through, paid everything off, bid farewell to all my suppliers, and tripled down on software. And honestly, I have not regretted it ever since. And since then, obviously, we've launched GoAura. We launched another resource recently called prepcenter.com. So directory. And we're working on some new stuff for 2023. So that's kind of my journey as it is.
Yeah, I think that's awesome that as I've scaled, like, so I was doing bulk books, I was doing well with that, and then I was trying to do OA and it just wasn't working, like doing both at the same time. And then once I stopped bulk books, it went from like 20-ish to 50 to 60 to 70. And last month we did like 120.
Nice.
And now like I'm kind of in the same where I'm like looking, I'm like, like how much further do I want to like push this? Like I really like making content, like helping other people. So
Sure.
it's like, okay, it's like time to decide, like, do I want to keep it around like 120 and like be like, listen, like I'd rather help other people because like I don't know, you probably get tons of messages saying like, oh, like your software helps. Like that's just feels better than like ours and stuff like that.
It does. It's funny. I never had that previously, or previous to Aura specifically, but yeah, getting those first like emails and support messages that were super positive. And I was talking to a seller actually the other day, and she was like, yeah, I went from $2,000 a month in sales to 20 grand a month in sales because of you guys. It's like, wow. Like, honestly, and like to see that person's emotions like wrapped up in that. Yeah, it's a huge positive feedback loop for me. So James and I both are way more impact mission driven than we are like, material possession driven. Like we like nice things, but at the end of the day, it's like what we want to build first and foremost has to have priority number one, impact. And that's what we're looking to do in 2023 is to scale to be frank, the hell out of that impact. So yeah, it's, sometimes where you start and where you end up are vastly different, and that's okay. That's part of everybody's journey. That doesn't mean if you're currently a seller doing OA and loving it, that you should not be doing that. Of course you should. But what's nice is it becomes a catalyst for you to decide for you as an individual, what's the best option, right? What makes the most sense here for what you enjoy, right? I dislike when people say everybody should be doing this because I make 7 figures with it. And that's not true. Like, you can make 7 figures being a drug dealer. That doesn't mean you're going to enjoy the process of doing that, right?
Yeah.
So you really have to think through what makes the most sense for you, right? Whether that's, again, scale. If you're doing 6 figures and super happy and you don't care about 7, don't go for 7, right? If you're at 6 and you want 7, go for 7. If you want to build a billion dollar business, go work on that with something that is capable of doing such a thing, right?
Yeah.
So I like this idea of reverse engineering the ideal outcomes that you want as a founder, and then choosing the model that makes a lot of sense for you to get what you need out of it.
Yeah, and kind of as maybe a personal question, I'm gonna be a little selfish here. So I do remember. So how I came across you is like, I don't even know how many years ago it was, but you were doing live sourcing. Like, no
Yeah.
one was doing live sourcing. So he was basically promoting Vendrive. It's like a CRM for wholesale.
Mm-hmm.
You just log all your stuff in there. And so he would basically do like live sourcing and find suppliers for people and like show you how to put it into Vendrive and answer all these questions. And he's like, I have a girlfriend, I read these books. Like, he's like doing like 8 different things. I'm like, this is insane. And I think like in a way, like, it must have been super hard for you because you were probably pegged as like live sourcer, wholesale Vendrive guy or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
until like kind of walk away and like be like, I'm not going to sell on Amazon.
Yeah.
Really not going to do that anymore. Like, how did you almost like kind of think about that?
Make that
Or,
transition.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a good question. It was difficult, and I didn't talk about it for a while because I was afraid of any backlash because I was the guy who literally had the wholesale business and had the Wholesale Made Easy podcast, who literally did live sourcing in our Facebook group every Tuesday for 2.5 years.
Yeah.
Eventually I forget who I had a conversation with, but they basically helped me reposition the thought process, right? It's not, I am leaving this behind because it's not real. It is, I am moving to my next phase. And so I had somebody say, well, what does that mean for me as a seller? Nothing. My journey has nothing to do with you, right? Like, the content, the value I've created at that point was designed to be evergreen.
Yeah, true.
And I'm not that special. So that's the important part. So a lot of it, like, honestly, my identity was not wrapped up in those particular things. My identity is actually wrapped up in being a high impact, high scaled founder.
Got it. That makes
So
sense.
that transition was only difficult because I was afraid of the external views of the people that I cared about. Right. But that's more like a fear response, right? That's a scarcity mindset, not an abundance mindset. And what's so crazy to realize is making that transition, nothing bad happened. Actually, only amazing things happened.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I've built a business far, greater than I ever thought I was actually capable of intellectually. And we're still continuing and learning, building a team, all the things. And so I think sometimes it's important to ask, what is that next phase, right? I like doing this with people when I'm helping on like the startup side. I do like some small consulting, and somebody's like, okay, well, my first goal is to do this full time. It's like, that's awesome. What after that? Well, I don't want to think about after that because it doesn't matter. I'm like, it doesn't matter 100% because a lot will change, and it is an assumption. But the simple fact is, if you're being really hyper focused on it and putting in the effort and the execution, you're going to hit that goal much quicker than you thought you would. And now you're going to be in a limbo state.
True.
That doesn't mean you need to have everything sorted out, right? But when a seller says, I just want to be able to do this full time, and I go, well, cool. What about after that? Have you thought at a higher level what you want to build? Like, I can tell you my life's goal, and I can reverse engineer it to the task I did today. That's by design, because I want to ensure that I'm not just reacting to the opportunities in front of me. A lot of times you need to say no to opportunities to do something greater, right? So I think that just comes down to mindset. And that's something I learned in real time. Like I was very much like, it's all going to come crashing and burning. Everybody's going to hate me because I'm no longer, quote unquote, a seller. It's like, honestly, none of that matters.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I definitely got stuck in that because I was just thrifting books and it just grew so quick. And then I was like, oh, bulk's the next step. And I was like, got a warehouse, got all the equipment, did, and was like, then I started doing it. I'm like, wait a second. Like a lot did change with Amazon with restocks and stuff, but like it's like I don't want a bulk book business. It was just the next logical step, but like I didn't think it through. Like I probably would have just went into OA or did something else.
Exactly.
But yeah, that's crazy. You came on here to talk about repricing, but now you just doing such great stuff. Can you just cover kind of like the different leverages you were talking about before?
Sure.
Kind of, I feel like a lot of the times I'm in this stage right now where I have two BAs, Q4 came, I just got laser focused, buying everything myself, kind of ignored them. And now I'm just kind of like, okay, like, do I need, like, I just need to like regroup, rebuild. And
Sure.
I know you're really good at like kind of, you know, helping put in a plan to scale and like kind of time leverage. So like, how do you think about that and kind of how did you work with it?
Yeah, I want to put this slightly into a model for us to think about, right? In the early days, so you have execution, you have strategy, right? I'm a big fan of the saying that is somewhat attributed to Einstein, which is every problem is either a physics problem or a knowledge problem. We're not doing hardcore hardware R&D here, right? We have knowledge problems. I heard, and it was on Twitter, and I, for the life of me, cannot find the person to credit them, so I apologize. But the person said that every business problem is either a strategy problem or an execution problem, right? You either know what to do and you're not doing it, or you don't know what to do and you're just working your butt off. So in the early days, right, it's always a ratio. In the early days, it needs to be like 90% execution, 10% strategy, right? Because what are you strategizing against, right? Your strategy is really just saying what you want, how are you going to do it, right? That's really strategy is. Strategy feels like this vague thing, but it's really not. So you start that way, right? In that version of it. And then over time, as the company and the business grows, you realize it's actually the inverse. Now it's like 80% strategy, 20% execution. How do you make that transition? That a lot of times is going to come through leverage. So leverage is interesting, right? Usually when you hear leverage, especially in this seller space, it's get a VA.
Yeah.
It's pay somebody to mow your lawn. Great, but that's table stakes. That's the foundational things. And here's the 8 like sources of leverage that I look at. You have flow, right? So getting into a state of flow or in the zone. The reason why that's a source of leverage is for time, right? McKinsey found that basically when you're in a state of flow, or when executives were in a state of flow for the research I'm referencing, they were 500% more productive. Wow. So that's working all day on Monday, taking the rest of the week off and still getting the same amount of output done, right? So being hyper-focused, getting rid of distractions is a power lever for sure, right? If you got 13 kids running around you and you can't focus in a library, it's irrelevant, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Number 2 is people, right? I used to be a hardcore, like, yeah, get a virtual assistant. They're so cool. Now having built a internal team, everybody is based in the US. We're all here locally right now. It is different to hire somebody for completing a task versus owning an outcome. I think a lot of sellers get this confused, right? A VA, you say, here's the SOP, you just do what I tell you to do. That makes the assumption by default that you are hiring people not as smart as you.
True.
So we're missing on a lot of things, right? Yeah, what you would 100%. Rather have done is pay somebody more to say, hey, you're owning this outcome, whether that's 10% monthly growth, sourcing, whatever, but you are the expert, or you are to become the expert.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody we hire is smarter than me. That's on purpose. Right? Because if I'm the smartest one here, like that doesn't really scale. Right? So I think a lot of times we get people confused. People is also networking, right? Sure. Who do you know that you can send an email to when you hit a problem that they can respond back with the solution in 10 minutes versus you spending 13 days on Google trying to sort it out yourself. Yeah. Right. So we want to think about that. Number 3 is systems, right? If you can systematize something, that's pretty awesome. Kind of in light with number 4, which is technology, you can automate things, right? If you can create a piece of software that you can create it one time and use it forever. That's leverage, right? You're putting one unit in and getting 2 units plus out, right? Super important. Number 5, sorry, prioritization and elimination. I think a lot of sellers get this stuck. They're busy, they're working a lot, but I'm like, what'd you get done?
Yeah.
Nothing important, right?
Yeah.
So I have a process in place basically to take all my tasks and then filter them and say, what are the things that are actually important? What are the things that need to get done, but like I can actually kind of punt, right? And what are the things that I thought needed to get done, but honestly, I can just eliminate it, just delete it, right? We need to whittle down to the things that are actually meaningful and impactful here. Number 6, rule-based decisioning, right? So here's a good example. Wear the same thing every day.
I love that.
If you go out to lunch, go to the same spot at the same time and order the exact same thing. We're reducing decision fatigue, right?
Yeah.
So I know that if I'm getting lunch, I'm going to cross the street, go to Tate, order a breakfast sandwich, scrambled eggs, add an avocado to go. Don't have to think about it, right? I'm freeing up more mental capacity.
They probably
So,
know you and they're like, you want the regular? You're like, yeah.
yeah, exactly. So that's super, super good, right? And then number 7, learning. I think this is one of the areas that is also incredibly undervalued.
Yeah.
Is just not like I took a course. I'm talking more meta. Like, how do you go from I don't know how to hire people, I don't understand recruiting, to you have purchased a book, taken highlights, extracted the key actions to take, and you are starting to execute on those in a very compressed time. Good example, like I'm not very social. I'm personable, but I'm actually very introverted. So I was like, I want to get better at networking. I don't even know how to define it. Great. I go Google what are the top books, buy it on Kindle, highlight it, export my highlights to Obsidian, my note-taking app, turn my highlights into an actual, like, here's what networking is, here's how you do it. And now I can just go and do it.
You're
But
right.
I can do that within the course of a week versus 3 months, right? Speed of upskilling yourself is incredibly important, right? And I think a lot of sellers get stuck here too, which is, I don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
And then that's it. It's like, that should be a signal for you to say, great, how do I go figure that out? And how do I know how to figure things out incredibly quickly?
Yeah, I
Right.
think it was Alex Hormozy's like, if you read it and you don't do it, you did not learn it.
Not at all. Exactly. 1000%. Right. So that's important. Number 8, skill development. Right. Sometimes you just need to learn information, how to do something. Another thing is skill development. Right. If I'm not good at sourcing, and we believe that sourcing is a skill set, great. You need to spend more time not sourcing necessarily, but practicing sourcing, understanding it as a skill, breaking it down into its subcomponents, and understanding where in that skill do you struggle, right? You can't just say I struggle at sourcing. What aspect of it? Because if we can figure out the bottleneck, we can solve that problem more intentionally and then unlock growth on the back end. So for me, I like to think about things from that perspective. And I don't do this by default, by the way.
Yeah.
I don't. I labeled learning disabled as a child in elementary school, right? So dyslexia, ADD, short-term memory deficit. I intentionally learned these things and have created a process for myself to trigger me to think about these things. So a good example, every day, last thing I do on my calendar is a daily shutdown routine. I will essentially rehab on the day, right? Like what went well, what went bad, what did I get done? Set goals for the next day based on like my monthly goals, my weekly goals. But I will also say, hey, try and deploy 3 of the sources of leverages tomorrow towards your goals, right?
Right.
Because I have so much that I'm trying to manage. I have to externalize everything, right? So I'm a big proponent of like the second brain kind of movement, right? I use Obsidian, everything's externalized, everything. And then I just prompt myself, which is nice. So again, source of leverage, I'm using technology to be able to externalize all this information and retrieve it whenever I need. So learn over time, what are the things that lead to peak performance, because that's my goal. And I'm trying to install these things in a way that is low friction for me as an individual, and then turn those into like daily habits and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting. I've never really heard anyone say that because it almost seems like that's not the goal. It's like to get basically more orange bars and then
Yeah.
like how do you go about that? Or like it's not really like, well, I want to like be like a peak performer, or it's more just like, well, like how do I get more sales? And like
Yeah,
I'll speak for like for me, it's like, oh, we gotta source more. But that like I think at like where I am now, like that's not the lever. Like it has to
it's
be
not.
something else. At 120, it's like I have to start outsourcing more. I have to
Yeah,
like put some SOPs in place. Like it was a terrible like Q4 was awesome, but like I did all the work. Like
yeah,
so I didn't leave my like 9 to 5 to work 9 to 10. Like that's
yeah,
wasn't
exactly.
uh,
So there's a big difference between internal and external motivation, right? Internal motivation is required based on some of the research literature after 75K in income, right? If you're making less than 75K, external motivation like money, like income, is a huge driver. Once you're past a certain amount, you actually need internal, and internal is a higher lever to be able to pull. That's why I'm not just trying to raise revenue. That is definitely a thing. Like we want to continue to grow, of course, but I want to grow as a professional. I want the company to grow. So you have to, again, this kind of goes back to my previous comments about thinking what's next, what's the larger goal here, right? I have a much larger goal that the company fits inside of, right? So that's an internal thing for me. So here's how I look at like these sources of leverage for a seller, right? Okay, so Floke, I would bet money that the average seller does not sit down and set weekly input goals, not sales numbers. Those are output goals. I want to achieve X, Y, and Z this week. That lead me to my monthly, annual goal, what have you, right?
what would an
Um,
example be? Because someone's gonna be like, I don't know what that means. I think I know
okay,
where you're going with that, but like
yeah.
maybe
So
2 or 3 hours.
let's say your goal, your annual goal is to double your revenue, right? Okay. The quarterly goal, and let's break it down to monthly, right? So annual, you want to double your revenue. This month, what needs to be true? What 2 to 3 things, major outcomes, not inputs necessarily, not outputs, right? Just outcomes that you need to generate that would get you closer to that goal, that annual goal being true, right? An example may be you realize after analyzing your time, all that stuff, that you could actually hire your friend's brother who has the time, who's incredibly smart, who could come in and own sourcing for you. Okay, so actually, one of your outcomes for this month is to hire a part-time in-person sourcer.
Got it.
Awesome. So with that's a project, right? That's an outcome you want. You now need to decide, what do you pay that person? How do you hire that person? How do you set KPIs and benchmarks for that person? Now we're talking recruiting and management. Okay, well, what don't I know about that? What books do I need to go read on that? You see how this all boils down to what needs to be true is always the question,
Yeah.
right? So that's one thing to consider. Another thing to consider is, so the reason why I bring that up is within the flow context, by the way, is having clear goals is a big flow trigger. If you don't know what to deploy yourself towards, good luck getting into flow. Another thing is knowing when, right? When are you going to do that? When are you going to decide these things? Is it today? Is it tomorrow? Is it at 2 p.m.? Is it at midnight? Nothing is right or wrong, but you need to know. So I calendar block and highly recommend, like on my calendar, like these are the things I'm optimizing for today. This is when they're getting done, right? So that can increase your level of productivity by knowing, okay, I source between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m. because that's my peak energy hours and I crush it then. Awesome. If you're going to be 200% more productive between 10 and noon sourcing, then always source between 10 and noon and do all the other things outside of those hours, right? We're starting to understand ourselves biologically and what makes the most sense. People, right? We already kind of talked about, okay, maybe you need to hire somebody. That's great. But let's talk networks for a moment, right? Who do you know that is 1 to 2 steps ahead of you that you could build a relationship with and you could fast track yourself towards the goal that you want, right? Who's the person that can unlock clarity for you because you're in the day to day? Sometimes you just need to talk to somebody externally. Great. Maybe that's a mastermind kind of situation, right? Who could you study, right? So it's like, who can you hire? Who can you work with? Who can you steal from? I love this, right? I saw this on Twitter the other day. It's like, in school, cheating is horrible. In reality, it's one of the best things you can do, right? There's no negative context here. It's like, if it worked, why wouldn't you just do the same thing, right? So steal ideas from people, right? That's awesome. That's fine. Systems. How do you source? Do you know, like, let's say you can't hire somebody right now for sourcing and you're going to do sourcing from 10 to noon. Great. How do you do it? Is it the same way every single time, or are you having to reset up and rethink and remake decisions that you could have just structured a certain way before, right? Can you then have systems in place? Let's say you're working with a prep center. That could be people. Awesome. So now you have a prep center working with you. That's good. What's the system to go from find inventory, source it, to the prep center has that order and they're waiting for it in the minimal amount of steps? Yeah. Okay, what about technology, right? What tools are we using now to either make ourselves more effective or more efficient? It's really the only two buckets that tools, in my opinion, kind of fit in, right? A lot of your Amazon tools, like the sourcing related tools, are efficiency-based tools. Yeah. They're not going to make you better, right? So if you suck at sourcing and it makes you 80% more efficient, well, now you're just efficiently ineffective, right? So that kind of ties into the skill development side, right? Okay, well, there's also the effectiveness-based tools, right? Things like GoAura, things like repricing, right? What are the things that are not worth your time that have very limited downside, if not none, and vastly higher upsides, right? You put one thing in place, you increase sales 20 to 40% within a handful of days, and now that process is in place indefinitely and compounds. Okay, that's one major decision that we can now make and be done with, right? So there's technology, rule-based decisioning, even within Aura. Do you have a default strategy, or every SKU that comes through, are you asking, what strategy should I apply? No, defaults. The power of defaults are amazing. I always use strategy A. And if it hasn't sold within 2 weeks, I use strategy B. Easy, done, right? Exactly. When do you decide to purchase something versus not purchase something? That's a rule, right? Learning and skill development. Those are very similar, but there's a big Venn diagram, if you will, between those two. But again, if you're not great at sourcing, but you're going to go hire a VA to source for you, good luck, right?
Yeah, 100%. That's like pretty much like kind of the biggest things that people come. They're like, I'm having trouble sourcing. Should I get tactical arbitrage or hire a VA? I'm like, neither. Like,
yeah, that's not
right now. Like, you need to bear down and like figure it out, and right. Figure out how to out. If you're like really bad at it, then like you got to learn how to get good, or maybe learn to train someone, or pay someone to train someone, or
right,
whatever you're gonna do.
Totally.
So let's get into why you're on here in the first place. I feel like that was like no one talks kind of. I watched a couple of interviews with you, and like all the stuff you talk about, like no one talks about it. So definitely super important. So what is GoAura? Mm-hmm. Why'd you start it? And kind of give an overview, or whatever you want to say about it.
Yeah. So Aura is a repricing tool for Amazon sellers, right? So the URL is goaura.com. We couldn't get aura.com, unfortunately. So we have goaura.com. But we started that because, again, in the early days, we started VinDriveCRM.com, very small market, learned a lot, failed a lot, basically treated it as a sandbox and learned a lot of what not to do in the SaaS space because we had no experience, right? This was the first, approach for us as founders. Then we took a step back and said, okay, this is a very small niche. We're really not going to be able to like scale this up. So what's the next thing? Like, we really learned a lot. Let's take those learnings and let's pivot into something more impactful. What's the tool that we wish was easier to use, that was more intuitive, that was also going to be exciting for us to work on? And that happened to be repricing. At the time, repricing was just very complex, no front end development work really being done, like not like the workflow of how you're using it, not really thought through, right? It was just like, here's all the tools. And it's like, wow, that's overwhelming. Right. So it wasn't super helpful, right? So when we took a step back, we said, okay, well, from a product perspective, we can definitely make it in a more modern way. We can make it way more intuitive to use, which is incredibly important because even as a newer seller, you still need repricing, right? But if you're still wrapping your head around everything else, jumping into a non-intuitive repricing tool is just even more overwhelming and you're just not going to use it, right? Yeah. So we knew we could do that. We also took a step back and said, okay, well, operationally, where's the opportunity here? And for me, the biggest one was customer support. Like, oh my gosh, in the entire Amazon space.
You guys have the best customer support, hands down.
I
I
appreciate that.
literally send these guys a message and a bot, if it's not there, be like, hey, someone's at lunch, like, see you in like 20 minutes,
Yeah.
or someone will just start typing back to you and they're like, what's up? And
Yeah.
it's not annoying like when you do other services and they're like, oh, does this article help? You're like, no. Like these articles are something like, oh yeah, like all the questions I was just asked were just covered in this
Yeah.
article. And it was like
So,
updated by Dillon like 5 minutes ago.
oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Again, we've been sellers. So like James and I have both been sellers. Amazon seller support, tough to deal with. Other tools. I obviously won't say the name, but we have had a head of customer support and success at a competitor apply for our job to be a support rep, right? Like we are hyper efficient, we're hyper effective. So, I think outset, we wanted that to be different. I wanted it to feel like you had a team of repricing nerds on your team, right? And that's what we decided. So I did the customer support myself as a founder for the first 2.5 years. Learned everything from scratch, right? Didn't know how to do it, understood and built the best practices before we brought on Finn and now Abby to handle day-to-day tickets. But that's one area we really wanted to change, right? And this kind of goes hand in hand with my comment about VAs previously, right? It's like we don't outsource anything. Like I can't tell you the number of quote unquote tech companies in our space where all their engineers are VAs. Like it's different, man. It's so different. And so although we don't have, let's say 24/7 support, 24/7 support's only cool if you're actually getting like 15-minute response rates. If it's like 24/7 support, but it takes 24 hours to get a response via email, it doesn't really matter, right?
Yeah.
So we really wanted to stand out there as well. And then again, just the tech side, right? So, I'll tease a little something here. We have a major announcement coming out in the coming weeks that we kind of teased in an email to users and affiliates last week. But for us, we're a tech company first and foremost. We're not an Amazon tool company. We're a tech company. That's our identity, right? So we don't think about what are the other seller tools doing in our space. Don't care. What are tech companies doing in the tech space? That's where the best practices are, right? Yeah. So we were fortunate enough to have an interesting combination that is rare, which is actual technical capabilities. Like James actually has a master's in computer science. And we were both sellers. Most of the time it's like only one of the two, right? It's like a seller turned guru who's like, I'm going to go build software because there's tons of money in it. And then they have no idea how to manage like a tech team. And there's like bugs and like all kinds of vulnerabilities they don't understand. Or it's somebody with the tech background who comes in and doesn't really understand the nuances of being a seller and tries to build software. And it's just pain. It just feels wrong, right? It's like, this is just not how it should naturally feel.
You don't understand what I'm saying. Like,
yeah,
like, you understand, but you don't. Like,
yes,
how it works.
Exactly. So for us, that was like the big thing. That was a big driver for choosing repricing and building GoAura, right? We saw the pain. We had felt it. Certainly we saw the opportunity. And when we started to break down what we could like do and the impact we could have, the value we could create, we're like, we have to, so I mean, props to James. He literally locked himself away for like 8 months and like cases upon cases of Red Bull. We didn't talk for like 8 months while he built the beta. And then between semesters in college, I flew during our winter break to Amherst up here in Mass, where he went to college, and we posted up and we launched the beta. And then I flew back and went back to school.
Wow. Yeah, no, and it definitely really shows. I mean, for me, I actually came across Chris Grant. You guys were doing the Repricer challenge.
Oh yeah, I love Chris, man.
I love Chris too. I have to have him on here. And basically, I have to say, Aura is probably one of the easiest things to set up. I've used 3 other repricers now. Not going to name them, whatever. But it's like, sounds so good. Like, it's like anything else. Like, you read the landing page, you're like, this is going to save so much time. You get in there, you're like, I don't know what to do. Like, I'm just going to praise manually like another week. Like,
yeah,
need some time with this or whatever. Literally, I heard him say on the call, he's like, you know what? Just say, hey, I want the strategies we talked about. Like, I'm going to hook you up with someone. I was like, yeah, right. Like, I'm going to go there, message them, and like, sure enough, they're like, is tomorrow good? I'm like, seriously? They're like, yeah, tomorrow. And then they're like, what are you trying to do? And they literally just like set it up for me. And walk through everything, and I'm like, what about this? What about that? And literally in a half hour, like everything
Mhm.
was up and running, like no really lag on the load in, like
Yeah.
just
And it's
crazy.
getting better, right? So I think so to pay some context, we've been having at least 2 user conversations pretty much every single day for the past
Yeah.
3+ months, right? So like really delving deep into some data. While I think we have done a good job, I honestly am realizing that we are probably doing 60% of what we're capable of, right? So on the product side, most certainly, on the onboarding side, most certainly, and on the support side, so we view support in terms of tiers, right? Self-serve, we got articles, we got videos for you. If you're the person that you can just read something or like, just use the product and like it's intuitive and makes sense, you don't need to talk to us. If you have answers and you need to reach out to somebody, cool. If a bot can handle that perfectly, it'll do it. If it can't, you're immediately going to start seeing somebody typing if it's during business hours, right? Like, 9 to 5 EST. But we try to make it to where if you need more handholding, we can do that, right? So we do onboarding. So if you need to sit down with us for 20 minutes, we'll schedule that and say, great, like, what do you need? Here's exactly what to do. And oh, by the way, when we're done with this conversation, not only will you understand it, you'll have it completed so you won't have to then go and do the work yourself,
Yeah, and I want
right?
to clarify that it wasn't complicated to set up. It almost seemed like it was too easy to set up, and I was like, I need to talk to them to make sure like this is correct. And like
Am I done?
I
Yeah.
do turn this on, like I did this correctly and nothing's gonna
Yeah.
go crazy.
That's the cool part, right? Like you can jump in, never talk to support. And right now I would say less than 3% of our user base actually actively talks to support. So that's good. So if you don't need to, don't. But if you're like, I just have a random question, you can always ask. And like we reduce the friction in the time it takes for you to say, I have a question or something's not clear to like you have an answer, right? Like we actually will have users throw us an ASIN or a skew and say, this feels weird. Tell me why.
Yeah.
I can go through the data and tell you exactly why you think it's weird. And I can tell you what's causing that weirdness if it actually is weird or if it's actually by design. I can tell you why it's by design. So we've seen a lot of data points and we have our pattern recognition really dialed deep. So we're at a point where we can really reverse engineer questions and problems, even if the question itself is not necessarily clear. Like we put our support people on like a pedestal, like heavily. Like it's not just answering questions. It's problem solving.
Yeah, no, it's definitely like Finn sent me like a Happy New Year's email. Like,
Nice.
I hope we talk soon. Like, if you have a problem, let me know. So, what's your philosophy about repricing? A lot of people maybe walk through when should you
Yeah.
get a repricer? What kind of rules should you be setting up? How should you think about stale inventory?
Mhm.
Kind of go through the gamut.
Yeah. So there's two kind of major philosophies I would say. The first one is where are you in your life cycle as a seller, right? If you just created your Seller Central account, you probably don't need repricing, right? If you don't have listings, I can't reprice things you don't have. However, the moment you start to ship inventory, you need to consider it. I used to say anywhere between, you should have $2,500 in consistent monthly sales or 20 SKUs. I've since pulled that back because the level of competition has increased, right? So is it more expensive for a newer seller? Yeah, right. It's not like a tiered system. But my perspective on that is you're either competitive or you're not. It's binary, right? So if you're a new seller, you're already working up against momentum, right? It's already more difficult because you're having to figure things out. So for me, honestly, the moment you start shipping inventory, you should have a repricer ready to go
Yeah.
because you're going to need it within a few weeks anyways, like last minute, like no matter what. But like have basically it's one of those things like you can just solve that problem so quickly and so like affordably. Like why wait? So that's the first one, right? Like where are you at as a seller? If you're still in a course learning to source, not worth it. The moment you start shipping, now you need to start considering it heavily. The second kind of philosophy here is the life cycle of your inventory. Everybody's different, right? So we generally recommend the oscillation strategy. The reason why the data just shows it works really, really well, right?
So,
You
what is
have
the
to keep,
oscillation strategy? I don't know if everyone knows.
yeah. So the oscillation strategy, if you think about an oscillation, it's a wave, right? It goes up and down. How do we increase sales on Amazon? Well, it's being in the buy box because 82% roughly of organic sales happen in the buy box, right? So if you're in the buy box more, you get more sales. Okay, well, how do you get in the buy box more? You have a better price. We can hate it all we want, but the economics designed by Amazon it is what it is, right? So we have to get away from this whole idea that Amazon's a flipping game. It's not. Amazon's not a wait and hold game. That's eBay. Amazon's a volume and speed game. So we have to get away from this idea of like penny chasing and price tankers. If that is your philosophy, I think you're really missing a bigger picture, to be honest. Is it the case that that does happen? Yes. But if your default of somebody doing that is that's what they're doing, I think you're actually missing strategy. And you need to pause and like ask why that person's doing that, because it's probably making a lot of sense. So the downward slope of the oscillation wave, if you will, to increase the sales volume is to reprice below the buy box by a penny. If you want to move inventory, that's what you do. Now, if I stop there, I'd say you're probably missing out on a lot, right? Because what do we also care about? We also care about profitability. Here's the interesting thing. Economically, those two things are the inverse, right? It's like I can't really increase your unit profitability and increase your sales volume, right? I can't double your sales price and increase your sales volume, right? Like that's just not going to happen. So we want to find a balance, hence why the wave goes up and down. So the up part is once you've reached your minimum price, super important, you go to your max price and you start this cycle all over again. In doing so, what's interesting is you're able to increase the sales volume of your inventory, but maintain a healthy average net profit per unit. Another thing mindset-wise we need to get really clear about for sellers is you're not trying to maximize the sell price of every single unit. You're not, right? Because here's the thing, opportunity cost matters. So if you're going to let something sit there for, let's say 2 weeks, because you're like, I'm waiting to get a better price, get more profit. And let's say you're going to get 20%, right? Okay, that's fine. But what if today you could sell it for 15%? Technically, that is less. And I know I have seen sellers say, I'm losing money. You're not. You're still making 15%, by the way. Yeah. But you got that cash now. You get now go deploy it again. So you captured 15%. You're now going to go redeploy the original capital to buy that inventory plus your profit. And you're going to go get an additional sell with that. So let's say you got, instead of the original scenario, which is you got one sell for a 20% ROI, you now got one sell at 15% and then a second sell at 10%.
Yeah.
You see how it's starting to compound. So a lot of sellers miss out on this and they're like, well, I lost 20 cents per unit. Who cares? You move 30% more volume. Like you're good. I promise you. Right. So it's important to understand speed when it comes to managing the life cycle of your products. So I think it makes a lot of sense within the first few weeks to default to an oscillation strategy, right? It's factoring in profitability, but it's also understanding like there is a risk of having inventory become stale. Now, once that has occurred, that staleness, right? Let's call it 2 to 3 weeks. It's different for every person. For me in the wholesale world, it was about 2 weeks I started to want to move things. Once we hit 2 weeks, liquidate. Wow. That doesn't mean lose money necessarily. All that means is I'm taking, let's say, my minimum ROI on my strategy from, let's say, 20% to 0%. I want my capital back and I don't want to lose money as quickly as possible, right? Because now we're getting into a problem of I have more capital locked up that I now can't go spend. And we also have to remember, some cost fallacies, right? Yeah. Just because you bought it and it was supposed to make 30% and now it's at negative 20 does not mean that you sit here and you wait for 3 weeks for it to potentially, eventually, hopefully, fantastically rise back up. No, it's gone. Sell it for a loss. Go take that capital that you did get back and go deploy it into something profitable. We have to be very unemotional about the numbers and about the products themselves. And that's hard, I think, for a lot of sellers to get past. But once you can get past that phase and you can become unemotional and you can become very systematic about how you view things and very, again, rule-based decisioning, right? Yeah. No matter what, if the inventory's been there for 2 weeks, it goes on my liquidation strategy. And if it's been there for 3 weeks, I don't care, lose money, I want it back. Yeah. And 2, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, it depends on you. It depends on your exact model. So that's something you need to think about. Now, you can mathematically do it, right? If you wanted to sit there and say, okay, well, my average ROI is X. If it's sitting there, eventually within this period of time, now it's becoming negative, or it became neutral, so to speak. I don't think you need to do that. Like, not everybody's going to be an Excel nerd like I am as a finance major, but like, just think about it logically, right? And a lot of sellers, unfortunately, that I've worked with will say, hey, my biggest growth lever or bottleneck right now is I need to go raise capital, right? I need to go get debt, equity, what have you. I'm like, okay, let's look at your inventory first. And, they want to raise 30 grand on debt, like an SBA loan, but they have 40 grand in sale inventory. I'm like, why don't you just liquidate it and move it? And they're like, well, I don't want to lose money. I'm like, you already lost it. It's already gone. Now you're losing opportunity, which is even more important at this point, right? So you really want to think about those things. So, the meta philosophy here is Amazon is a volume compounding kind of game, not a flipping game like eBay. And so you really need to think high numbers, scale, velocity, stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, when I first started, I wasn't using Aura, I was using something else. And basically, when I'd be like, okay, like, I'm not going to turn on the repricer. Like, I'm just going to, sell at the highest
Yeah.
price, let the price come there or whatever. And then it was just like, I think it was Chris. He's like, I set my like ROI at 20%. I'm like, that's insane. Like, I don't know why, like, you're the price tanker or whatever. Like, just go.
Yeah.
But then, like, when I was like, you know what? Let's just do it for a week. Like, it's really easy to turn on, turn off, do whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was crazy. Just like, I don't know. I became to be happy with, like, today I sold something for $49 and also $69. 2 hours later, same list of, oh, I wish it was at 69. But like, I'm not catching all the sales at
Yeah.
60. If it was at 69, I wouldn't have got the 49. Like, and
Right.
who knows what's happening tomorrow? Like, everyone can
Yeah.
get on that listing, still profitable. Who cares? Like, let's keep it moving. And I've really started to like adopt that. And yeah, it's definitely when you suck the emotions out of it. I've definitely had that. It's like, oh, like this Lego set, it's Lego, like they age well, like kind of feel. It's like, yeah, maybe. Like I don't know. Like, who the hell knows? Like, they could
Yeah.
all get recalled tomorrow.
But here's the thing, right? Like, there's a difference between, so like I used to flip luxury timepieces, right? Watches. That's a hobby. I'm not paying my bills with that. So yeah, hold it, wait for the market to come wherever you want, and then sell it. But this is a business, right? You're building a business, you're building a company. We really need to get to reality and accept how Amazon works economically. I think a lot of sellers are like, I just don't like it. I'm like, you could not like it. It's irrelevant, to be honest. Like, it is what it is. It's their house. We're playing their game by their rules. So we need to understand that at any given moment, the true equilibrium, if you will, if we're thinking about it from like a supply and demand economics perspective, is fluid, right? Like, what that unit is worth right now, this moment, is $55. In 2 hours, it could be $65. That's fine, but we need to understand that we have two options. We can either ride that wave, or we can peg ourselves to a ceiling or a floor, if you will, and wait for that wave to come to us to then capture those sales. The problem with that, though, is you're missing out on the vast majority of potential sales.
Yeah.
And you're making a mad assumption, which is that it's going to come back to you. You don't know that, right? It's like, listen, I understand buy boxes. I understand keep it charts and all that stuff. The simple fact is, it is not always true that a keep a chart is going to perform the exact same way as it always has.
I learned that the hard way. The first Q4 I did, everyone's like, buy all the Legos Amazon was out of stock with. And I did, and it did not work out. And I was talking to someone much further along the path. They're like, it's Amazon. Don't you think they would look back and be like, we need to order more next year? I'm like,
yeah,
never thought about that. But like,
right.
Good point.
Yeah.
What do you think some of the biggest mistakes like newer sellers are making repricing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is a handful. I think being too conservative on their pricing is a major win. A lot of times we're working with a seller and they're like, hey, like, I'm just not seeing the performance I expected. I'm like, okay, let's take a look at the strategy, right? Because we know we have our data. We've had 10,000+ users come through our doors. Like, we get it. When we take a look, they're being very conservative. And 9 times out of 10, our recommendation is, hey, switch over to an oscillation type of strategy. There's usually a lot of hesitation and a lot of fear, right? And a lot of that fear comes from the community in this myth that you're a price tanker, you're a penny chaser, you're the devil. All these things are incorrect, right? Because I was told those things before I started a repricing tool and saw the data, right?
Agree.
But once we can get past that and say, hey, listen, try it for a week. If you hate it, you toggle it off. They never toggle it off. They get 2 to 3 days in, they're like, don't touch anything, right? So I think understanding what is possible and getting past what other sellers who are, by the way, your competition are telling you to do, and using first principles to really think for yourself, like what makes the most sense here based on like reality and facts. That's a big one for sure. Number two, it's mins and maxes. They're kind of difficult, right? Mins are easy to set, right? Dynamically, you say, hey, 20% ROI. Awesome.
And one thing with the mins, Aura does that automatically for you. That
Yes.
will save you a ton of time.
Yeah. Yeah.
It
So it
off,
is
but
a huge
that's
time saver,
like
especially as your costs change, as your fees change, you need that to dynamically update, right? Max prices are different. Right now, we don't dynamically, I mean, we can dynamically set those based on ROI. However, max prices have nothing to do with your buy costs, right? It has everything to do really with what is realistic on a SKU, right? You can't say, hey, 20% min, 1,000% max. Doesn't work. I've seen so many sellers just be like, well, my maxes are all $1,000. Okay, why? Well, if somebody wants to pay me $1,000, I want to be able to take it. Love it. Nobody's giving you $1,000 for a $20 product.
enjoy that
Ever.
$800 return fee.
Yeah, like never going to happen, right? So let's be realistic here. So ROI is also kind of difficult, right? So I typically recommend setting those manually, and the way we've recommended doing that is to look at each listing and say, what's realistic for somebody to pay on a high end? Like it's kind of a stretch, right? The buy box 90 last 180 days is $25. Would somebody pay 30? Yeah. 32? Yeah, but it's kind of like, it'd be a hard sell. Okay, your max is 32, right? Maybe 31. Moving forward, I think we'll be able to push out a way to dynamically set max prices, not based on your cost, to eliminate that. So mins maxes, that's number two. Number three is really just not letting the system do its work. I've seen some sellers jump in, they create everything, and then they micromanage the software. I'm like, hey, like you paid for a software to do all this for you 24/7 so that you can go do something else, which is more important, like sourcing.
Yeah.
Don't sit there and micromanage and refresh pages so you know what's happening.
Yeah.
We got you covered. Yeah. And it's happened, right? Like, we've seen sellers be like, I've been watching this for 3 days. I'm like, it's 3 days you haven't been sourcing, man. It's like 1 unit for the SKU. Like it's like a $10 profit. You're fine, So I think also giving some of the reins back or letting go of the reins is what I meant to say, and letting the software do what it needs to do, and understanding like if it's not performing the way you expected, go talk to support so that we can figure out if there was a expectation that you set for yourself that was incorrectly set, or if there's a setting that you didn't think about or didn't know about when you were creating it, that we could just be like, oh, just toggle this on and like it's going to do exactly what you want, right? You need to think about it at a more macro level instead of thinking like per SKU. You need to be thinking about your entire account, right? So you need to start thinking about how do I, again, leverage, right? How do I create a strategy that, works for 80% of my inventory incredibly well? And then like, that's it, right? If you can tweak your strategy and get 10% more performance out of it, and you got 5,000 SKUs, that's huge, especially over the course of an entire year. So really thinking about it as like what it is, which is technology, and like that technology is giving you leverage in terms of what you are capable of, because like no human being can keep up with any repricing tool, right? Like just, you can. I can't type that fast, and I'm pretty fast at typing. So that, and like the free time, right? Now you get to go source more. I talked to countless new sellers and like, oh, I was doing this once every hour of the day. And I'm like, it's not worth your time. Even if it only takes you 5 minutes, it's like the switching cost and all these things. And like at this point, pricing competition is so high. If you're not doing instant repricing, it's irrelevant. There are tools that, you can pay like hardly anything for, but you're repricing once every 15 minutes. I'm like, honestly, you could have sold like half your inventory within that period of time.
Oh, right? Yeah, easily.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're like, I looked at it every hour. It's like, yeah, I remember it just like destroyed you. Like in that 10 minutes, like you don't stand a chance.
Yeah, pressing match buy box. Yeah, they'll do that.
Yeah, definitely not the way to go.
Yeah.
Can you tease anything about the new GoAura? And I'll definitely have you on again to like kind of walk everyone through like how to set something up when it's ready.
Totally. Yeah, so I can't give exact details. Here's what I can say. We're ushering in a new era of Aura. We're not releasing a feature. We're releasing features, but the announcement is not, we now have this. It's like, it's deeper than that. So at a more meta level, we are taking every aspect of the company, the product, everything we do, and we are questioning it all, and we're amplifying it. So we're taking all the lessons learned over the past handful of years, right? Like, we have grown so fast. And we're a bootstrap SaaS company, right? We didn't raise money. Like, we got to a point, luckily and gratefully, where we took off incredibly fast, right? So we're just trying to keep up, and that pulled us back from being able to fix bugs and release new features and all these things, so that we could, operations, like, we got to build a company, we got, to build a team, increase capacity. We got to a point where we said, what's the next 5 years of Aura, not the next month?
Yeah.
And so behind the scenes over the past 6+ months, we've been working on some awesome stuff. So in the coming weeks, we're going to have a full on, explanation of exactly what that means, what's happening, exactly what's changing, what you can expect, all those good things. But the goal is to 10x everything that we are as a company and as a product. So we're really tripling down on that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I can't wait to see it and
I'm pumped.
hear all the stuff that's going on. I mean, it's already like an amazing piece of software. Like, I can't really.
Yeah, it's gonna be product. It's gonna be content. It's gonna be everything.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's like one of the coolest parts about kind of your team. It's like how you kind of explained it before, where it's like, yeah, we're not really looking at the other repricers. Like, we're looking at like what other tech people are doing, and like, all what they're doing are like the latest trends. And I think that was one of the biggest things that really helped me last year, was like to almost like stop watching YouTube videos about Amazon, just like kind of like think about like watch business people, listen to other podcasts, and like apply those principles to the Amazon business, because like no one else is talking about that. So it's like
it's the foundational stuff, right? It's like, and I've said this before too, a lot of sellers need to get outside of the Amazon bubble and go consume content from people who have built multiple businesses much larger than theirs in different spaces, right? You want to understand foundational things that the business model itself doesn't really matter as much. It's still applicable, because a lot of times you're solving a vanity problem that once solved doesn't really have an impact. And what you really need to do is the hard stuff, which is like what's applicable to every business, which is things like finance, which is things like recruiting and hiring, which is systems and operations, right? The quote unquote unsexy stuff, but it's the things that actually move the needle more easily and more impactfully than anything else.
Yeah, no, that's great. Where can everyone find you?
Yeah, so GoAura.com. So GoAura.com. Again, in the few weeks coming, we'll make a major announcement. We'll flood it everywhere, I promise you. So fun stuff coming your way there. Start a trial. Listen, we're ungated. We don't require a credit card to sign. You can start a trial. If you hate it, don't put your credit card in ever. My recommendation is, if you're looking or you're wanting something that is easier to use, that gives you more of that leverage, sign up for a trial. You can immediately reach out to support and say, I'd like an oscillation strategy, please. And we will put that in your account for you. If you want an onboarding, ask for an onboarding. We will schedule you an onboarding session. We can get you up and running in hardly any time. And again, if it doesn't work out, totally get it. You didn't lose anything, but ideally, we're able to help you lift your sales from, anywhere from, we tend to see 20 to 60% is kind of the range, depending on where you're at. But ideally, you do that within the 14-day trial, and we already made you money anyways. So we try to make it easy.
Yeah, I'll put a link down for them, and it really is a 14-day trial. Like most softwares, it takes you like, who knows, maybe like 12 days to like get it set up, and you're like, oh, like, does this work? Like, I don't know. It's based on 2 days. And yeah, I mean, I think that's just one of the great things about kind of Aura, and like I can attest to it. Like, I thought I was going to be annoying, and I had a whole list of questions, and they were answered like 5 minutes.
Oh, we got you covered.
Anything else? And I was like, oh, I thought I had a lot, but no.
No, we got you covered. Yeah, and we just recently launched a quick start guide to pull some of the stuff together. I mean, you can actually start a trial, sign up, and be actively repricing within 10 minutes if you follow that guide. talk to nobody, honestly. If you need to, we got you covered, right? Like however much hand holding you need, we can provide you, and however little you want, we can let that happen too.
Yeah, no one ever says that really. So
Yeah,
that's one of the big differences. Well, thanks for being here. I
of course.
really appreciate it. And
Yeah.
yeah, we'll definitely have you back on when
Awesome. Yeah. And listen, if anybody has any questions about anything we covered, repricing, peak performance, and that stuff, like shoot me an email. Like I'm super accessible and nobody takes me up on it. Like Dillon, Dillon at vendrive.com, vendrive.com. Send me an email. Like I will respond to your email. So love talking with sellers.
awesome. Well, thanks so much, man.
Well, thanks.
Have a good one.